Hello, everybody, and welcome to the DATAcated Show. My name is Kate Strashny. I'm the host of the DATAcated Show and founder of DATAcated. Today, we're talking about a new exciting topic, generative BI. So we're basically going to talk to you about the journey of going from GenAI, which I'm sure you've been hearing about over and over, day in, day out. And now we're going to talk about the capabilities for analytics and GenBI. Now, with me here today, I've got Avi Perez. He's the CTO, Chief Technology Officer at Pyramid Analytics. And I've actually had a chance to play around with Pyramid's GenBI software. I've had a chance to play with their sort of ability to speak to the software, which I can't wait to show you. And I saw a demo of their capabilities at Gartner, what was it, like 2-3 weeks ago, what Joe Bobian gave a great demo, and I was able to stop by the booth. Anyways, it was super, super exciting. So this is going to be one of the most fun shows, I promise you. I'm going to go ahead and bring Avi up on our virtual stage. Avi, welcome to the DATAcated Show.
Thank you very much, Kate. Great to be here with you today.
Thank you so much for being with me here today. Really, really excited. Before we actually show people the tool and show them the good stuff, tell folks who you are and what's your role with Pyramid.
So my name is Avi Perez. I'm the CTO and one of the co-founders of Pyramid Analytics. It's a company that has been around for quite a bit of time, and our big focus is on bringing super high-end, sophisticated AI-driven analytics to everybody. Everyone wants to get their hands on data, so we'd like to be the facilitators of that particular outcome.
Great. And then are there specific industries that you're specifically focused on, or are you just helping everybody with analytics?
So the product is general in the sense that it can be deployed into anything that's got data on it. And our customers today range all kinds of different industries. We do have places where we pop out more, specifically those industries where data is the central asset, insurance, banking, finance. But we have a huge set of customers in retail, for example, manufacturing, and at the end of the day, it covers quite a few different industries. The key ingredient for wanting to use Pyramid is that you have maybe complex data-driven business questions, and you need something that's beyond the pie chart to answer them, and then you'll find the Pyramid story resonates with your problem set.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of power there because we do collect a lot of data. We have a lot of data. We store it. We pay for that storage. And a lot of times we miss the actual insights because the people who need those insights can't access the data. I think 10 years from now, people are going to look back and say, really? You guys had all of this, but it's behind this wall. No one can get to it. And the people who know how to get to it don't have the business domain expertise, so they don't really know.
First of all, you're spot on. The funny thing is, 10 years, we said that 20 years ago, by the way. 20 years ago, in the early 2000s, everyone said, wow, self-service was just beginning to take flight. And said, wow, this is the next era. And in 5 years' time, we'll look back and think, how crazy were we, And I've been in this industry for, unfortunately, way too long. But, in the 90s, it was very difficult to get to this kind of functionality. The 2000s came and everyone got into more self-service, and it's obviously improved in that following decade. But the funny thing is, you'd be shocked when I tell you that the same data problems exist. It's just at a different scale. You still have the problems of garbage in, garbage out. You still have the headache of, is the data correct? I've got a copy of the data. You've got a copy of the data. Now it's formulas. And now, ironically, the self-service has actually meant that more people have got their fingers in the cookie jar. And that's actually created a different set of problems, which is that everyone's got their own version of the so-called truth. So I'd like to think that things have progressed. They have. The software and the general industry has moved on a huge amount. And this is where the whole GenAI frameworks are going to move it even further, which is where our idea of the generative BI comes in. But I think the problems have metastasized, and they're going to keep going so because we're going to collect even more data in the future around everything. We're already doing it, and the problems are going to just move. So, a decade ago, you were impressed if you built a pie chart. In this era, we're like, wow, so you can do a regression. And in the future, you might be wanting to do a prescriptive result, like, okay, machine, what should I do tomorrow in my business? The should questions, which are the real the real eureka point in data and analysis is the machine telling you what to do completely.
Yeah, I was gonna say pretty soon we won't be asking the machine to do things. It'll just say, "Hey, Avi, I think you."
Exactly.
It's not even say, "I think I know." This is what you need
Yes.
to look at
Right.
right now. That's
Well, I always tell people it's like maps, right? I can tell you now, most people today have no idea where they're driving. They just put their details of where they want to go into the car and off it goes. We completely follow it. No one questions whether it's right or it's wrong. It's like, okay, Google told me to go here, and off I go. We've lost the idea that we're going to come up with our own ideas. So imagine that amount of magic working on your corporate data sets. Point to the accounting solution and boof, it tells you, well, these are the things you need to do. This is who you should hire. This is the kind of investments you need to make. And you don't even question it. Yeah, you want to get to the same level of what I call it auto magic that we have with a car driving solution. I don't mean self-driving cars. We're not there yet, but at least the mapping part. And yeah, if we get to that, that's the next year, in my opinion.
exactly, and it's not that far-fetched, though. We don't have to leave too much to the imagination because I know you've got a demo to show us. So I think let's go ahead and pull up your demo. By the way, those joining us live, if you've got questions or comments, we'll take those throughout the show as well. So Avi, you've got the stage here. Show
All
us
right.
what we can do.
So just to give everybody some context, this is the application. I've logged into one of our servers hosted online, and it's admittedly is the professional experience, which means it's got a lot of bells and whistles. And you can imagine the same functionality is available for less technical users. In fact, the entire concept of generative BI at its core is to actually take the sophistication and simplify it so dramatically that anybody can use it. You don't have to be a very, very advanced user. If we haven't done that, then what was the point? Anyone can code things. The question is, can we make it dead easy? You can just talk to the machine and get it to do. But nevertheless, I'm here in the professional experience. For today, I've created just a session here, what we call a discovery, pointing at a certain database. It's a classic relational database with, classic hierarchies, attributes, dimensions, and whatnot, and some measures over here. So from that perspective, just to set up, it's all very, very ordinary. To show you how this works, I'm going to ask it two questions. One is the start question and a follow-up, just to give you a sense of how it works, and we'll see where it goes from there. So I click this button, and now it's beginning to record me speaking. Hopefully ignore this preamble. All right, so show me product by net margin and sales and put it into a scatter chart for me. And at this point, it took my speech, including my preamble and all my instructions. And at this point, the language model is trying to understand what I asked it to do and comparing it to the ingredients, which in this case is the different metrics and structures inside the semantic model, and it's drawing it for me.
That's really fast too.
It's pretty good when you consider the amount of work it had to do to come up with that. The funny thing is the query itself ran in milliseconds. You can see that over here, but I'm not going to show it to you. You know what? I won't do that. It'll take time to do it.
Okay.
But it ran about, the query itself would have run like 5 to 10 milliseconds. All the work is in the language model and understanding what it's supposed to do and going through its gobs of different ideas in terms of resolving it.
Which makes sense, because if there's a data analyst, most of the time it takes them is to understand what is it that you actually want me to do, Avi? Okay, and then to actually do the work, it sometimes is not that intense.
That's correct. And I think on an incremental basis, you can consider it to be slow, because I might be able to drag and drop and do that myself far quicker than talking to it. But if I don't know what I'm doing, or I ask very vague questions, or I don't know the data model well, or I don't know what analysis to do, now, even if it takes a good 15, 20 seconds to resolve what to do, you're actually good with that, because you yourself might not have come up with that answer that quickly in an intellectual sort of way. And obviously, if you use this to build an entire dashboard or report, it takes it 30, 40 seconds, but the amount of work it did is way quicker than what I would have done manually if I had to do each of the steps myself. So there's a give and take on that. And we expect the language models to improve dramatically over time in terms of their performance. We're at the beginning of this exercise, and we expect a huge change coming forward. So in this case, it understood, the net margin, sales, understood what to do in terms of product. You can see here all the selections are made for me, which is good. What I'm going to do now is go to the chatbot and do a follow-up question on it and see if they can do something more interesting. And let's see if it works. Chatbots are driven by the large language models. They themselves are not 100% infallible. There's the whole hallucination issue. But we've done a lot of work to make sure that we reduce it and that we get a consistently good response, regardless of what you ask and how you ask it. So let's take a shot at the next question. Here we go. All right, I want you to keep the non-outliers and split the data into 4 groups.
So as it's loading, I wanted to ask, the graph that comes out here, it's not just a picture, it's an actual working chart in Pyramid that you can filter on, manipulate, change the colors if you needed to, right?
Correct. It's fully dynamic. This is very different to what I think some people have been doing in Python. With Python, you generate a Python, basically an application that includes the data connection, the data querying, and it generates the visual, but it's a static image. It's literally a raster PNG image. This is live. It's in Pyramid. Mm-hmm. I'll show you in a second and answer your question, but just to show you what's come out of this, is it understood to focus on, it did an outlier analysis. So you basically had a scatter plot. So it effectively did a regression, found the outliers. I asked it for the non-outliers. So you can see it's filtered on the in group. If I came over here, wait, you can see there's in and out. So it took the outer for me. First of all, it did the outlier. Then it focused on the in group. And then last but not least, because I asked it to put the data into 4 groups, it ran actually a cluster. Now, this is it's not got all the definitions of the clusters here. We're trying to keep it light and simple. You can make them far more complicated, but it did a pretty good job in effectively taking a scatter plot, focusing on I'm going to use the word inliers, and then clustering the result from that. Mm-hmm. And then to your point, it's live. So for example, as I hover over things here, I can what we call slice and dice things by any other dimension and hierarchy because it's all live. I can change the visual. That's a more interesting one. I don't want to look at it like that in a scatter plot. I want to look at it like this.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Right. There's a button over here, another little AI widget, which is an auto-recommended visual. And it says, based on the amount of data you're looking at, maybe you want to look at it like this. It's an alternative way of sort of consuming the data, and everything keeps working from here. Obviously, let's assume I took cluster number 1 and said, that's an interesting group. Actually, do cluster 2. That's the one that's the bigger one, right? Let's take cluster 2 and say, if I was to break it up now and look at it by, the education of the customers in this database, mm-hmm. If I do something like that, you can see now I'm starting to drive into it and it starts to do the next analysis and so on and so forth. So if I look at it like that, you can see how that looks. And obviously, this is, you can change it in any way you want and play with things. There's many, many ways of doing it. You can do that, so you don't have to see the horrific coloring, and you can go wherever you want with that. So there's one example. Yeah. And there's a good example of taking AI to begin it, and then also following up with your own point-and-click experiences and your own intelligence as to how you want to do things. It's a great little vignette of how Pyramid would work to produce an outcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing the demo. We can go back to it if you want to show stuff later in the show. But I wanted to ask, so most people have probably, especially in the data space, they've played around with throwing a data set into ChatGPT just to see what happens. How good is it at understanding? How would you compare your GenBI solution with the very basic ChatGPT offering?
So this is actually the crux of the problem with the ChatGPT story. Not just ChatGPT, but the whole large language model. The idea of being able to pump data into a large language model and ask it for insights, while it's tantalizingly sexy as an idea, it's horrifically unworkable. First of all, it's impossible to load a significant amount of data in through that mechanism. Customers of Pyramid are using it on 1 billion, 5 billion, 10 billion, 100 billion rows of data. I can't say, analyze that for me while I spend the next week and a half uploading it to the LLM. It's just totally unworkable as a practical solution. There's a security problem too. Everyone is horrified about taking their top secret, highly sensitive corporate data and putting it into OpenAI's engine just to get a result back. So it's both dysfunctional and a security headache. So Pyramid flips the whole thing on its head. And the best way to understand it is as follows. Pyramid allows users to submit their request. We hand it to the LLM together with a whole bunch of descriptions of ingredients, what I call ingredients. to say, here's what is in the user's database. This is the good diagram. And the LLM basically comes back with a recipe. It says, this is how you should ask the question the user is asking for. The question is then executed by Pyramid on the data itself. That's what Pyramid's fundamental functionality is all about. And it predates the whole GenBI era, is that you point Pyramid at your data set, drag and drop on the screen, and it's going to go on the query for you and bring it back. Where it gets interesting, specifically with Pyramid, and not uniquely to Pyramid, but where it does get interesting, is always direct. We never copy the data into Pyramid. It doesn't scale either, by the way. Same with the large language model, so we have the same problem. So we will run the query for you on your data set. By the way, any data set, that's important. You don't have to be in a specialized structure, specialized tech. It doesn't have to be a specialized semantic model for it to work. It just works. We get the results back. We mash them up in whatever way we need to do analytically. And then we serve it back to you. Some of the service is back through Pyramid. That's what you saw in the chart. Some of it is the LLM itself. So it will actually respond, maybe with an analysis, maybe with an insight, maybe with an explanation, a text explanation of what you're seeing. And for those people, we can even articulate it back to you with what we call speech out. For people who actually want to just listen, like you listen to a podcast, and you don't want to read things, you can do that all for you.
Right.
So the trick is that Pyramid actually is talking to your data, not the LLM, and that makes it scalable, functional, secured. And I actually think it's the only way in the current era that we know of to make your corporate data work with an LLM. Anybody else suggesting otherwise is not really taking it out in a realistic way. It just doesn't work.
Very, very good. Thank you so much for walking us through, because I think a lot of people are a bit confused of how does this actually work. So I think that was super helpful. I was just looking into the comments. We've got John. Hello. We got Greg. Hey, Jess. She says this is so awesome. I agree. This is super awesome. Question back on the demo you gave. So you asked the questions, it gave you charts. Are we able to ask questions of our data and get answers in written form back, like for insights, for example?
Yes, you can. So first of all, insights are a very good example. Interestingly enough, again, this is another mistake. It goes back to your previous question. Can the LLM generate the insights? The answer is ostensibly no, it can't. It doesn't have access to your data. Mm-hmm. If I put a snippet of your data in, like a small little data set, potentially it could. Although, as far as we can tell, in the current era of large language models, they're not that good at mathematics and certainly not that good at analytics, surprisingly. They're great with the language, not good with the numbers. So actually, all the insights are generated by Pyramid. We put it into, we send it into the model and say to it, could you please articulate this for the user, either based on what the user specifically wants, or articulate it in nice, plain language. And then the LLM will respond. That's a good example of the LLM doing the recipe and doing the survey. But again, all the work is done by Pyramid. You wouldn't want, you couldn't get a deep analysis on something below the query level that's inside the database by the LLM. It has to be done by the robot, what we call the robot in the exercise, which in this case is Pyramid. It has to go and do all the work, dredge up all the information, hand it to them and say, here's what we found. Now you go and explain it to your user in a way that they want to hear. If you think of it like that, that's a way. The other way is something called explain, which triggers a whole bunch of very, very high-end machine learning algorithms that can answer questions very, very fast and try to deconstruct values. It could be key driver analysis. It could be influences analysis. It could be feature attribution. And the list goes on. And the obvious question is, what can't it do? And the answer is, at the moment, theoretically, nothing. It's just a question of taking the time and energy to glue all these pieces together, with the caveat that it has to be very fast and it has to be something that we could run on the spot. Because if it takes an hour for it to respond, you're not going to use it. You're going to be like, you know what, thanks, but no thanks. It's going to be something that people are Google search time, which is now. I want my answer now. I'm not going to wait an hour for the answer.
That's
reasonable,
100%.
and we need to make sure that we can match that. So those are all the things that we're doing. There are other ones, but those are very good examples in terms of how it responds with text versus responding with a visual or a query.
Awesome. So we've got a cool question here from John Waller. He's asking, how much do you need to explain the data to Pyramid Can I just upload a CSV data set or connect to my SQL database and it will work? Or do I need to explain the data model and build definitions? Can I answer this because I played with it?
Go ahead.
Okay, John, all you do is you upload the CSV. That's it. You don't have to define the columns. You don't have to explain anything. When I played with it, it was super straightforward. But now, Avi, go ahead, add your technical answer.
Yeah, no, first of all, you're correct. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. What people forget is that for all the UI magic to work, predating even GenAI, and this is true for any BI tool in the marketplace, whether they say it to you or show it to you or not, everybody's building a semantic layer. You have to have one to understand how the data connects.
Mhm.
Now, CSV file is a great demo. It's also a bit of a cheat because it's a single table solution and it's dead easy. There is no connections or anything else. But if you came with a relational database, and I'm talking like any kind of good relational database technology, from the new ones, the old ones, the cloud ones, to the non-cloud ones, Pyramid will point at it, instantly derive a semantic model for you. You can tweak it if you like, but generally speaking, if it's a well-structured database, it just works out of the box, and you can ask your first question a second later, it just works. If you want to do black magic, which means you want to do something unusual, you want to change the joining model, you want to redefine columns, which will then influence the way the entire engine works, you could do it. That's going to require time and energy, but it's not like a development project over 3 months. It's something you do in 10 minutes, and from that perspective, it's not a lot of effort to get it to work. Most companies, so this is not for everybody, but most companies coming to us with their classic corporate data warehouse, even if it's a data lake version, and always shocked that we can point at it and be up and running with the first question 5 minutes later. It's that simple. You can also come to us with the older stuff, like an OLAP cube, believe it or not, or SAP BW InfoCube, all these things that have a vestige that are like a 20-year-old technology. They work too, by the way. They interestingly have their own semantic layers built in, and very, very well-defined ones. And Pyramid can talk to them directly too, and they work out of the box. Don't lift the finger. In some respects, they're easier to use, assuming you've got one. If you don't have one, then it's the opposite. They're very difficult to use because no one wants to build an OLAP cube.
So you can work with everything. I love that.
Yeah.
Next question I had for you was, not everything has its challenges, right? So I want you to talk about maybe some of the challenges of using a GenBI tool from Pyramid.
So I think it goes back to the problem set of what question to ask. That's the first problem. What question should I ask it? People often ask us, well, can I take anybody off the street, point them at my operations database, and they can ask an intelligent question and get an intelligent answer? And the answer is, well, probably not, because you need to ask a question that has some relevance to the data. You've got to know something about the data set. Now, amazingly, this is where the language models have made a profound impact. You don't have to be unbelievably specific. You don't have to be very accurate. You don't even have to be intelligent in your question. In fact, you can make spelling mistakes. You can ask questions incorrectly, and it will unravel that and come up with a very intelligent answer that matches the question. But you have to have some knowledge about what you're asking about. So I can't ask an accounting question to your sales operations database and get an intelligent answer back, because it'll try and mangle the two and come up with nonsense. So that's the first comment. I don't think it's a terrible bar to hit, but it does mean some kind of knowledge. Outside of that, the other pitfall is that if the data coming in itself is lousy, then you're going to get lousy in, lousy out, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out.
Goodness in, goodness out, Avi.
Okay.
This is a positive.
Make it positive. Good point. So that's one that's another caveat you need to be aware of. I would say the next big headache is making it scale. What I mean by that is people are dying to ask very specific questions, and that doesn't particularly work well because the large language model doesn't have the detail on your specifics in your database. And I mean like real personalized entities. I don't mean personalizing people, but very specific things. And it can take a guess for you. And in fact, that is, it's the obvious question people ask us all the time, is what comes next? And the answer is solving that problem. Being able to ask unbelievably specific questions around specific entities in your data set and getting an intelligent answer back that you would be happy with. And that's the next big leap that we're looking to do. And it's a challenge, not because you couldn't do it somewhere, somehow. It's a challenge in terms of how do you scale that and how does it work without having to take your gigantic, 5 petabyte Snowflake data lake and making it work instantly. How do you do that without building it again somewhere in a new form of data set and whatnot? You want to avoid that. Now, I mean, our competitors have tried to do that. Some of them have even done that. But the customers of that solution are not thrilled with it because it doesn't scale well. It requires months of engineering and very slow, hard to hydrate. That's the next frontier. And whoever solves that will have solved something profound. And I can tell you now, that's what we're working on, solving that particular issue.
Yeah, if I think about how it currently works with, let's say, working with a data analyst or a team of data scientists, the 3 issues you listed, one was asking the right questions. Well, that's something the business has to take care of with GenBI or without, right? We need to know what questions to actually ask. What do we care about? The bad data, I mean, if anything, I think the prevalence of GenAI, GenBI is going to push people to try to clean up their data so they can take advantage of these kinds of tools. But that the last piece, we're asking the very, very specific questions. I think that's going to be the bigger challenge, right, for your team and your company to address, because a very specialized data scientist is probably more capable at something like that, where they are so close to the data that they can get really, really specific. But again, you can't really scale unless you have unlimited resources, which we don't.
Correct. And I think it is the next eureka point. I think the large language models have unleashed pure language to ask unbelievably complicated questions, and it works. But that doesn't solve the problem of the specifics, because the LLM has no idea about the specifics of your data. Pyramid does know it, and we have to glue those 2 problems together. How would it know about something it doesn't know about? I know it sounds crazy, but that's what we need to solve. And if we could close that gap, then I think you solve the next gigantic iteration of GenBI and corporate data without very, very fancy fine-tuning and a lot of effort and engineering work to make that happen, which a lot of people come to Pyramid and say, well, could we do that? And I always tell them, it sounds like something that's very obvious to do, but it's actually an absolute monumental challenge to fine-tune an LLM pragmatically on a live data state of data, which is hydrated probably every 2 seconds. The next customer name, how do you fine-tune your LLM, every 2 seconds? It's not a reasonable idea. Even in the best of circumstances, you couldn't do it. So how do you do that? That's something that we're working on now, on trying to solve that. If we do that, the next gigantic leap has happened, and now you can get to very specific questions. What was Kate's performance last month, and how did she perform to last year? Who's Kate? Where do we find her in the data?
What do you mean?
Right? But it's a real challenge, right? If you ask something about let's say fixed points, what we call fixed points, things that are globally known, like countries and states and locations and addresses or dates, it becomes very easy because they're definitive. Everybody knows where they are. But if I get to something idiosyncratic, it's very, very difficult to resolve. Even though we've already got pieces of that in place today in the current product, but it doesn't really quite go full tilt, and that's ultimately the next frontier. Whoever solved that one is onto something profoundly impressive.
Well, we need something to strive for, right? We need to keep you busy, Avi. So that's good. You have something to focus on.
I can tell you it's emotion. We're working on that exact game plan now. That's one. By the way, the other one that comes up a lot is formulas. Like, be able to ask my own mathematical interpretation of the data. This is another challenge. Not because coming up with or enacting the formula is difficult, but understanding what the user wants to calculate, and then getting a syntax that is ultimately correct. Both of these 2 things are the next frontier of work and challenge. Whoever does it produces something profound, and not giving too much away. These are the 2 fundamental frontiers that we're chasing in the GenBI space from Pyramid.
Great. So for those listening, I'm assuming they all want to try this. They want GenBI in their organizations. What advice do you have for them to either prepare for this technology to be unleashed, or do they get in touch with Pyramid? What are some next steps?
So, I mean, I know a lot of people can go online and play with ChatGPT and whatnot and get a simulation of uploading a spreadsheet and doing all that kind of. You can do that now with a free account and play with it. This is not what we think of as GenBI. It doesn't deal with real data and will never really work in a high profile or high performance model. It just doesn't work. So if you want to try the real stuff, you basically need to look at getting something like Pyramid deployed in your environment, talking to your data, and then it will work. How do you do that? Well, first of all, you can come to our website. There are plenty of places to, click a button and contact us. Number one, we can have an instance pointing at your data live on the spot, and you can query it on the spot. You can see it working. If your data, again, is mission critical, top secret, confidential, which most companies' data is, then you can always go the other way. We can help you get an instance of Pyramid set up in the cloud, on-prem, anyway, it doesn't really matter. And then you can be up and running. And believe it or not, it doesn't take more than 10, 15 minutes to install Pyramid. And takes you 5 minutes to point Pyramid in one of your data sets, and 5 minutes later, you can be asking questions. In less than an hour, you can have the whole thing up and running. So that's our experience. I know there are other vendors out there that have different stories and different sort of experience curves. But to get to what we're taking to market is not a lot of effort. And you just need to contact us, and we'll be happy to facilitate that. And it's not a major effort to make that come to fruition.
Awesome. Well, Avi, I want to thank you so much for being on the DATAcated Show. Thank you for everybody who joined us live and anyone watching the recording after. If you want to check out Pyramid, we'll drop a link in the comments on LinkedIn and YouTube, so you can go ahead and check that out. But if you go Google Pyramid GenBI, a bunch of stuff will come up, and I'm sure you'll find your way. If there's a will, there's a way. You'll find it.
Yes, just pyramidanalytics.com. It's that simple. So you'll find us at the button in the right space. But again, Kate, thank you so much for having me today. I'm very excited to talk to all of your followers, and we look forward to catching up in the future with the next iteration.
Great.
Hopefully.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Avi. Stay dedicated, everybody. See you online.
Thank you.